You there, exiles, a moment of your time. Today I bring to you the Bone Mage. It's going to be Blood Mage using her bones for all the bone skills, with 100% critical strike chance most of the time, and detonate that COC. Now I never realized that this build is going to be this powerful until I saw that both Bone Cage and Bone Storm have 15% base critical strike chance, meaning the two furthest notes of the Blood Mage Ascendancy class to the left are completely useless. Both skills also do high base physical damage. Bone Cage can be cast at long range almost instantly with astral projection support, very good pin CC, decent clear speed with the COC, and powerful temporal chains curse. We got great map sustain thanks to our high risk, high reward play to go into the fray, pick up the health orbs and energy shields from Grim Feast. Now the cons are that you need to really swap the skills between boss fight and map clear. It can be scary without hitting the boss, and you need a really good window of opportunity to channel all the skills to land those hits. So, without further ado, let's get into the build. So this is the character right now. We are sitting at level 94, just leveled up this morning. And we got 3000 life, 6.5 KES, 1.3k mana, and 150 spirits. Our resistances are pretty much capped except for chaos, which is still pretty decent. And we got 103 strength, 74 dexterity, and 208 intelligence. Now we could swap out some dexterity for strength because that would mean more health, which is very healthy for a blood mage because we need that health to cast some spells. However, earlier I was running Combat Frenzy with the build just to generate power charges with the keystone that swaps frenzy charges to power charges instead. Here's the thing though. Power charges do actually benefit Bone Storm for getting more AoE, but since I changed my map clear from Bone Storm to Bone Cage, I found that power charges generation is pretty much useless, so I took it out of the equation. Anyway, we're gonna head on over to the equipment, skills, and the passive tree, and then we'll do some T15 map clear for you to see what it's all about. So, let's head over to the equipment. Now, the equipment is pretty much standard. There is no unique combination over here whatsoever. You don't need that Invictus or the Hand of Action Wisdom, whatever, Headhunter, blah blah blah. It's just a lot of rares, but that means it can also get very expensive. I spent, I think, pretty much well over 50 divines on this character, and even with my equipment from my previous character, it is still pretty costly, and it's not even the best ones yet. So we'll take a look at some of these. So our weapon is the wand with some increased fist damage, increased spell damage, increased crit chance for spells, cast speed, and level of all physical spells. We have the 18 mana, which is a bummer. It comes with the 19% increased spell damage, but it's a tier 1, so I have yet to get my hands on another Omen of Whittling just to make the Chaos Orb rolls that T1 out. I think it can't get any worse than this, so there it is. Okay, another 8 divines to be spent on this weapon. And the rest of it is just a lucky result of corrupting these equipment. So they came with just one socket, and for some reason the god of corruption smiled on me and I got these two instead. So there's not a lot of energy shield on this health though. Some people can go like well over 250 to 300 energy shield, but the thing is, as a butt mage, you're going to need a life modifier. So that also means you also need the chaos resistance as well. You can't do CI as a blood mage. It is just a simple fact that you cannot. Okay? Now, the maximum mana is also very important because blood mage does not remove your mana cost. That would be the blood magic keystone that converts your mana cost to life cost entirely. So you don't need mana in that sense. But here, the Blood Mage has life cost on top of that mana cost, and it's going to be an equal amount. So let's say you need 300 mana to cast a spell, and then you're gonna need 300 life as well to cast a spell. So it is pretty brutal, but it is what it is in pursuit of power. Now, here's the thing, right? You can indeed try to go blood magic on top of this, but that doesn't mean that your health is not affected in any way, because it converts that mana cost to life cost, so you're getting another health cost on top of whatever it is that is already there. So for example, just now I said if you need 300 mana cost, then you're gonna get 300 life cost. With blood magic, that 300 from mana gets converted extra to life cost. So you need 600 life to cast a spell. So it is very dangerous to do that. But again, you don't need to worry about mana. So if you manage to make it work, then that's good for you. But anyway, so we got this helmet and there's some life regen on it. I tried to go life regen on all the equipment just so I can get my hands on the Blood Mage Ascendancy that gains energy shield on the body armor as extra health, but it just ended up not working the way I intended it to. So it's still there. I have yet to find a better piece of equipment on my helmet, but you know, it is what it is for now. And the focus is pretty darn good. We got the ES over here, the all spell skills, spell fist damage, crit chance of spells, and cast speed. So basically pretty much the same, except that we got the maximum energy shield instead of the fist spell damage. I think no, yeah, the regular spell damage. Anyway, we got two sockets that got the soul cores of Hihwani instead. So Hihwani is the, I think, architect of ceremonies. So back in PoE1, he was doing some sacrifices in the Temple of Atalatel, and Alva would actually made a comment on her character if we actually let the guy live. But anyway, in the story on that lore, yeah, we got the extra health, so that's why we were able to get our health over 3k at all. We got the gold amulet, and it doesn't really need to be a gold amulet. I don't really run rarity on this item, on this character, but we got the level of all spell skills, cast speed, some fire resistances, max mana, max life, and percentage maximum life. So that is very important if you want to get your health up this high. The crashing wave anointment is just basically increased damage if you dealt a critical strike recently, as we will soon see from our passive tree. We got a breach ring from our other character. The fire damage does absolutely nothing, so it's there, but we can try to find a better piece of equipment or jewelry for this ring instead. But it is what it is. We got 15 all element resistances and the 78% increased mana regeneration from the mana modifiers quality as well. And the cast speed is great, max life is definitely great. The 24 maximum mana is also kind of a bummer still, but to use an Omen of Whittling on here, I don't think that would be such a wise idea because it will surely remove our cast speed. What we need removed is the maximum mana, or change it to something else. I mean, we could end up get some accuracy instead. I don't know, that would be even worse. So I ended up corrupting it instead. So no change, and that was great. And we got the prismatic ring. This ring alone gives us 24% all element resistances, so that is pretty good. We got some rarity, which is just happened to be here, and there's 36 evasion rating, which is a bummer. Again, it is a tier 3 evasion rating, so with our chaos orb, with the Omen of Whittling, it will remove our cast speed once again, so I'm not doing that. But anyway, some mana regen and cast speed and life. So these two rings are pretty much the same. There's one row of modifier that is absolutely garbage. Okay, so the fire damage on here and the evasion here they do absolutely nothing. But, you know, it is what it is. This is what I have at the moment. The body armor I just got yesterday, in fact, and there is another piece of armor that was identical to this one that I have, but both of them were uncorrupted, so I tried my luck and used the Omen of Corruption to vow those two instead. So my other one got my lightning resistance removed and turned into a life regen instead. So still, we got cold resist and chaos resistance and some spirits. Although not 50 spirit, it's only like 40, I think 42 spirit. But we got a great amount of life and energy shield. And we got 3 sockets on this thing instead. So that's why I'm running this piece of equipment for now. I don't know if I'm gonna find another piece that is potentially better or ideal for my build, but this is working out fine for me. Anyway, we go to the gloves, and that's where our dexterity comes from. We don't need this dexterity at all, but like I said, I can't find a replacement for this one just yet. And I tried to corrupt it, and I end up getting maximum frenzy charges instead, so I don't even know why it's here. I don't even gain any benefits from that, so I might just try to sell this and see what happens. However, with this maximum frenzy charges corrupting implicit, you don't get a benefit for power charges that you gain from changing the frenzy charges to power charge with that keystone, because power charge is a power charge, so it's a completely different thing. So, in terms of generation, yes, it does change from frenzy to power charge, but in terms of maximum amount that you can have, this affects the frenzy charge, not power charge. Okay, so I just want to make that clear. Anyway, the ES is not very good, but it's doable. We got some good life on here and crit damage bonus and some fire resistances. The belt, cold resist, stun threshold, and the implicit on the stun threshold as well. So a blood mage is very susceptible to stun if you actually go like channeling spells like what I do. And corruption just gives me that 10 int, so that's definitely very nice. We got 165 life, 108 maximum mana, flask mana recovery rate. You're gonna actually find that mana recovery on the flask is very important to you. And we got some strength over here just to get extra health, a little bit more. But, you know, it is nice. And then we got the shoes, the sandals. I don't want to say boots because these are not boots. These are just like, you know, glorified flip-flops. But anyway, we got 107 ES on this thing and a fire resistance rune socketed into it. So most of our gear pieces have fire resistances, but then I don't know where I get that much cold lightning. Maybe from this piece over here. Yep. But anyway, we got cold lightning on the sandals as well, and some int, some maximum life, and more stun threshold. So the character doesn't really get stunned unless you're running a map that has a monster has increased stun buildup. That is very, very dangerous. And the flasks really is just nothing special. Reduced charges per use and increased amount recovered, but you do get spell leash from your blood mage ascendancy anyway. There is also the mana flask that increased amount recovered and chance to gain a charge when you kill an enemy. Although, you know, I prefer that you gain charges automatically with the modifier that gives you that, but it is what it is for now. I'm trying to find a new one. There's a thawing charm, and this does absolutely nothing because our belt has only 1 slot anyway. But this has been in here since the time that I got 2 slots on my leveling belt, so it is what it is. Whatever. Okay. Anyway, so that was the equipment section. Now let's head over to the skills, the active skills. So we got Bone Blast from the weapon that we don't use anymore. Well, I used to use this, but, you know, it ended up not being as good as I thought it would be. However, this does not cost health or mana at all. So if you were to use Bone Blast instead of Bone Cage, you're gonna notice that there is some slight DPS difference between the two. But I think because there's support going on here as well. If I were to change that to here, it does pretty good amount of damage, but, you know, It's like not very special. But it's still a pretty good amount of AoE. The downside is that it has some small delay before the activation, pretty much like a curse. So I ended up not using it instead. Anyway, so we got these setups, live remnants from the Blood Mage, COC with Detonate Dead. And Detonate Dead is awesome because it deals physical damage equals to 20% of the corpse's maximum life. So even though it explodes in fiery spectacularity, it just doesn't really do fire damage that much at low level. Of course, if you level this thing up to, like, let's say 20 from the gem itself, it's going to do a lot of fire damage on top of that physical spell as well. But we are a Blood Mage doing a lot of physical damage, so we don't really care about that. All we care is the mana cost for the COC, and this is as low as it can get. I don't know yet if the corpse's maximum health can be modified by any type of spell damage modifier. So in PoE1, any damage that comes from a corpse explosion cannot. But I don't know about PoE2, maybe it's the same thing, because if there's a lot of damage coming from the corpse's health already, and you modify it further with spell damage modifications, then it's just gonna be too crazy. We'll see what the community has found out. Maybe people already found it out and I just don't know yet. How ignorant. Anyway, there's a increased AoE, more AoE actually, and increased energy gain, and a chance to refund half of the energy, so we trigger this a lot more often. Now you're gonna notice that there is a blink over here, so we do in fact swap this out when we're fighting a pinnacle boss like Zesh or King of the Mist, or even the Arbiter of Ash. So this does absolutely nothing for the boss fight because there is no corpse. We just blink to get our survivability. Anyway, this Bone Cage are clear skill, and it's just pretty much a spammable. And you're gonna notice that my health does indeed go down, but you can leech from enemies very quickly because you're doing a lot of damage. Keep in mind that even though this says 58 DPS, and partially it's already calculating the critical damage from the skill, but don't forget that this skill has a 59% crit chance, and we're doing ambush support once again to get 100% more out of that. So another 59.4% extra would mean 100. You're gonna crit every time you hit the skill on a full life monster. So that's a lot of damage, and every time you crit, you're gonna spawn a health globe from the Blood Mage Ascendancy once every 2 seconds, no more. Okay, so that's really awesome. We get the inspiration as well for less cost and physical mastery because there's nothing else to kind of like use here. But it does in fact get our DPS up by like 7k. So that's still pretty good. Now Astral Projection makes it so that our Nova skill is cast at the mouse location instead. So without this, you can always cast the Bone Cage around you. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. It's pretty good, but sometimes when you're clearing, you want to be able to just kind of like point your finger and magic spikes appear. So that is really cool. And we actually do get a benefit from less AoE because Bone Cage is what it is. It's a cage and it does absolutely no damage in the middle. Okay, so because it doesn't do damage in the middle, anything that doesn't move will not get damage, and you're just gonna end up spending the spell for free. Now you're gonna notice that we have Spell Cascade as well. So Spell Cascade does indeed give 2 extra casts to the sides, but less AoE. But you're gonna see that it's empty in the middle still, and the AoE is even bigger. Now you could argue that, oh, why don't you do the concentrated effect. So concentrated effect is on our Bone Storm, which we're gonna go see in a moment. But in terms of bit damage, it's already enough on the Bone Cage. So with Spell Cascade, it makes it so that there are 2 more cages to the sides, and you're gonna see that these 2 cages do overlap at the one in the middle, so you end up spiking whatever it is that's in the middle. Okay, although not every time, because there's still that small amount, you're not gonna hit that beetle, the golden beetle that shocks you, okay? So you're gonna kind of like need to be careful with that, but then again, you can run and cast, and whatever that is running to follow you will indeed get stuck in the spikes, and most of them just die, okay? So the bones do linger for a second or so, and that is still pretty deadly to all the monsters, okay? On top of that, the bone cage is our source for pinning, because hits are already pinning on bone cage, and by itself, it's already pins as though dealing 50% more damage, okay? So with the quality, we add that pins as though dealing 50% more damage also on top of that. So that's 100% more damage of pin status, okay? So it doesn't do more damage, but it pins as though you're dealing that much more. So, and look at the base damage. It is pretty insane how much base damage this thing has. Okay, so there you have it. This is our clear skill. Not the best, but also pretty much manageable when combined with Detonate Death. Now we got Tempora Chains, okay? And Tempora Chains is going to be on our second weapon. The second weapon really, it doesn't really have anything special, though one could argue that you could kind of like change level of our chaos spells to all spells instead. This doesn't give you the benefit to Temporal Chains, but if it was all spells, then Temporal Chains would get that benefit, okay? So my second stab is actually nothing. I just kind of like want the residual power and the cast speed, and maybe some mana regen as well, because you actually do spend a lot of mana to get all the curses and some other stuff down, which we'll see in a second. But Temporal Chains is huge. You're gonna see that it's got insane AoE, but also there's a cooldown on this because I don't really use that except for when fighting a boss. I just want to make sure that I always curse the boss no matter where I aim. So that's the reason for the AoE, and the activation is pretty fast, and we got insane curse effect. So initially, the bosses do get cursed with 20% or 25% effect of Temporal Chains, and that is very significant. On regular monsters, it's 46 to 50%, depending on our curse duration, which we'll see from the skill tree. We got increased delay, but increased curse area effect. But it's still pretty fast activation thanks to our passive tree on weapon set 2. And we get persistence for more skill effect duration, so Temporal Change already makes it so that debuffs expire slower. With persistence, you ended up cursing the boss for like nearly half a minute, so they're gonna stay slow for a very long time. And a lot of people have been asking me, why Temporal Chains, why not vulnerability? Because our physical spells do break armor by themselves, so we don't need vulnerability. And it's not like in PoE1 where it just increases physical damage taken on vulnerability, it breaks the armor, or ignore the armor, as I should say. We don't need that because our hits do break the armor, okay? So Temporal Chains just makes sure that the break armor stays there longer, they remain heavy stunned longer, and they just act a lot slower in general, okay? And the bleeding stays there longer as well. Although the bleeding isn't really that significant, it is still pretty moderate, okay, considering how much damage we're doing. And we got expense with the AoE. So if we take this out, it is still huge, but I just want to go absolutely stupid and just go that huge. It's just really impressive and, you know, feels great when you land the curse on a lot of mobs, especially on Expedition. When everything spawns at the same time, we do in fact get extreme archaeology on Expedition, so that we get one bomb, huge, and so we land the curse and we are pretty much safe from harm. Okay, anyway, Bone Storm, the start of the build, we got more area damage, less area effect. So the bone spikes do explode tiny bit, okay? You don't see it, but really, you don't even need that for clearing. You don't need Bone Storm to clear at all. You do in fact get the benefit from explosions on the boss's feet, and they overlap, okay, with lots of bone spikes at the same time. So these do overlap a little bit, okay? If the boss is huge, then it's going to eat all that bones at the same time, like what you saw on the intro clip, okay? Anyway, there's more damage with spell hits and less cast speed, so I don't really care. We're a little bit slower, we're just gonna deliver that much more damage. We got super critical, 100% increased critical damage bonus, but less critical hit chance. So we're gonna notice that we got 47% critical hit chance, which is pretty darn low, considering our other thing is critting at us all the time against enemies at full life. But we have a winner. And it's right here, okay? With this, you're getting critical weakness, which gives you more critical chance against monsters. Well, basically the monsters are debuffed so that all hits against them has increased, well actually added, yep, that's what I should say, added base critical strike chance up to 10%. So from 15% base crit chance to 25% base crit chance with the help of Io Winter. So we end up critting all the time with Bone Storm on the bosses, and because we have super critical, our critical damage bonus is nearly 7 times. So plus 100 means the hits do twice the amount of damage, but this is almost plus 600, so that's nearly 7 times the regular hit. This is insane, okay? And that means you're gonna get more bleeding damage out of that as well. And the projectile and the explosion are separate, so the boss can get hit with the projectile and the explosion as well. So that's one thing why this skill is so powerful. It's pretty much like splitting steel in PoE1, where the shrapnels do explode and people just combine it with Nimbus just to make all of that projectiles come back to the center and just explode the boss. So the projectiles do overlap, though not in quite in the same fashion like the splitting steel plus Nimbus, but it's still very powerful. But you're gonna see that the damage output are slightly different because the skill itself over here, the skill itself does say there are 2 portions of the damage on the skill. Okay. Anyway, that's our the build, and you're gonna see that there's soul offering over here. I don't even use it anymore. I tried to run soul offering with a skeletal cleric, but it ended up not working because the skeletal cleric had way less health than I thought it would. So it would just pretty much die at anything that it touched. So yep, useless. And as Grim Feast, obviously. We run it with clarity and cannibalism just to get a little more sustain out of this. And of course, the Eye Winner, we talked about it. Yeah, that's pretty much it on the skill. So let's move on to the passive. And it is pretty much standard critical setup. So we grab everything that is related to critical. And the reason we come over here was because at first, like I said, we wanted to do some combat frenzy, but it ended up not working the way I expected it to. So that's why it's just empty over here right now. But then these critical nodes are very powerful, so we got those as well. And there's just a lot of 2 weapon combinations going on, so we're gonna go over all of those in a second. So most of the non-specialized points are in the ES and criticals, as well as the ES in general, and cast speed and some intelligence over here. More ES and some arcane surge on critical strike. That's very powerful because we're critting a lot. Now only 10% to gain arcane surge doesn't seem much at first, but Bone Storm and Bone Cage doesn't hit once, they hit multiple times. And if the enemy keeps running into your Bone Cage, it's still considered a hit. So there's a lot of chance that you're gonna always have Arcane Surge up while clearing the maps. And the bosses can also grant you Arcane Surge as well because there are 20 bone spikes on bone storms. Okay, so it's really, really powerful here. And increased effect of Arcane Surge is obviously very nice. Okay, so yeah, we got crit over here and some ES over here. Similar to my Flame Blast build, except for that we just came over here too. While the other character does not have this side of the tree. And we got the jewels, and they pretty much look like this. The curse duration is kind of like optional, but you're gonna need spell damage, max ES, and critical damage bonus. Okay. And there's the mana on kill instead of the curse duration. Damaging ailments is meh, whatever, but you know, since the bleeding is an option here, it kind of works. Okay, so on pinnacle bosses, it doesn't really do much, but on maps, enemies that get stuck in your bone cage and they don't die, they often bleed out to death. Okay? And another mana on kill over here, I wanted to actually get a 1% extra on here, but there was nothing like that on the market that was within my price yet. It was crazy expensive just for 1% extra. Or maybe I'll change it later and sell that for a cheaper price. We'll see. Yep. Once again, damaging ailments, not really important, but you know, the top row, the top 3 rows are important. Okay. Now, let's take a look at the 2 weapon skill specializations. So our first weapon set would be on the crits over here as well as physical damage. So crit chance, as well as the ailments. Once again, it's not really important, but this node is very powerful. Okay, as well as that. Now, the magnitude of bleeding is, again, yep, anything concerning bleeding is great, but it's not that significant, just to let you know. But the 25% increased fist is very nice. Now, we got increased fist over here, and then the break armor comes in right over here. Break armor and critical hit with spells equal to 5% of physical damage dealt, another 5%, and another 10%. So we're breaking armor equal to 20% of physical damage dealt. And that alone is already very powerful, although 20% doesn't seem much. Don't forget that our crit multiplier is like what? Almost plus 600, so almost 7 times the base damage. So it is going to break the boss's armor in no time, usually in just 2 bone storms, and our temporal chains just make sure that it stays there for the longest of times. And we're spamming bone storm on the boss anyway, so it's still going to keep that armor broken no matter what. The chance to inflict bleeding is meh, although we get the inflict bleeding chance on critical strike from the Blood Mage tree anyway, but still, you know, we're gonna go see that in a moment. And another one over here is just Fizz, crit damage bonus, Fizz, and then some strength and Fizz and crit damage bonus. So this is very good. And lastly, these are the remaining Fizz damage on my first weapon setup. So break 30% increased armor is definitely really good, although that's not very important. The most important thing is we get strength and 25% increased Fizz damage. Okay, so that was the first weapon. Now the second weapon, you're gonna notice that we get the AoE for the curse and for our sigil power, so that we have more room to move around while the buff is still active. And here is also a little more AoE as well. Now there's some int over here, whatever it is what it is. And we got curse duration over here, and even increased curse duration and increased effects of your curses. We got debuffs with increased slow magnitude, increased hinder duration. Okay, so increased damage with hits against hindered enemies over here. It doesn't really do anything because we're doing damage with our first weapon setup. But we're getting hindered from this node, which is giving hinders to enemies you curse. And that's an extra slow amount. Okay, because tempo chains already slow by a lot with our increased curse effect and everything, and then there's hindered, which means even more slow. So It's not like playing the Chronomancer where you just like run around and enemies are slow, but it's still pretty good. Okay, so lastly we got the effect of your curses, faster curse activation. So that's why our curse activation is a little faster than usual, even with the double delay on the support gem. Yeah. Oh, by the way, there's still the first weapon over here with some crit. And then there's of course the Anoint. Okay, 30% increased damage if they dealt a critical hit in the past 8 seconds. So we're doing crit pretty much all the time anyway. We're gonna always have this bonus up no matter what. I have yet to find a better option for this, but you know, if there are anything better, that's gonna be more expensive than this node for sure. Cause this one you need Despair, and Despair I think it's not even a divine, but you know, it's still not that cheap either. But, you know, it is what it is. For now, I'm gonna try to look for something that could be worth more than that. But, anyway, let's look at our ascendancy. So, the cool thing about Bone Cage and Bone Storm is that their base critical chance is 15%, which means this is completely useless. You don't need this. Okay, so these 2 extra points could be spent elsewhere, and I chose to spend on extra physical damage. And, you know, the elemental contributes to bleeding is whatever. But, you know, this is really, really awesome, okay? You could do some gain extra lightning damage for the shock as well. And the shock will kind of like gives you even more damage dealt to the enemy. But, you know, if you're running Brutality support, then that's not gonna happen because it removes any damage that isn't physical. Okay? And then there's the chance to inflict bleeding on critical hit over here as well. So once again, the first 2 points, the Blood Mage doesn't really get much benefit from this. So when I first tried this setup, I immediately got these 4 points from Act 3 because you get increased crit damage bonus per 40 life, and because the bone seals have already high critical base chance, we can pretty much get the benefit of ambush support right away. So we ended up doing a lot of damage from the early game, starting Act 3 onwards. Okay, after you get the points 3 and 4 from the Trial of Chaos, then you're pretty much doing insane amount of damage. Now, you could once again try to go for Life Leech before that, but that's also where some regeneration on my gear came from as well. So the early game, if you can get your hands on life regeneration, it'll be better for you because you either have to choose this or that. Okay, and without these, it doesn't mean that you won't crit. You're still gonna crit, but it's not gonna be as powerful. And by the way, this value over here, it does not show on your tooltip in the damage page. So if you go over here to your skills, okay, when you unallocate these points, your crit damage bonus doesn't change. So that's interesting, okay? Anyway, that's the entire skill tree. So I hope this sheds some lights on how or what I do. Okay, now let's do some tier 15. We're going to... Let's see over here. Reduce class charges. Pack size. Bramble, fine. We're just gonna X for the sake of it. Yeah, extra lightning, whatever. Okay, let's put our stuff away. Yep, and that goes away as well. Now it's a great time to demonstrate some boss damage as well. We're gonna go do Burial Both. It's much more fun than C-Page, I think, anyway. Alright. Let's get ourselves on the keyboard. And headset. So, right off the bat, Bone Cage and Detonate Dead are doing really awesome. Oh, and by the way, these guys can explode from Detonate Dead and they won't do their explosion effect, so you won't get damage from that. Just put some bone spikes at their feet, and you're done. So yeah, pretty satisfying clear. Again, not the best, but also not the worst. And let's actually look at how slow we can get these monsters too with our temporal chain, so just wait for the thing to go away. Alright, so here it is. There you go, 45, some hinders. Look at that. And it stays for a long time. And the pins, make sure that they stay in place. There we go, he just blew up. There we go, that's a rare. And he's gone. And the Devourers, they can't jump on you because as soon as they get up, they're gonna get impaled. But when I say impale, it's not like impale in PoE1, okay? It's just like a terminology for this kind of effect. There we go. So throughout the entire run just now, I didn't have to press a mana charge even once. Because of all the efficiency that we had set up with the mana on kill and everything. And Detonate Dead has an 8% base critical chance, so sometimes it will not crit around the monsters, and that's why we see some monsters have low health instead of dying because they got hit by Detonate Dead that is not critting. But it's still very powerful. Okay, so there's the boss. How do we get there? Oh, and the checkpoints, by the way, it's still only at the beginning and at the end. There are some maps that... There are some maps that have multiple checkpoints, and that's great, but most of them just have 2. And I find that to still be very not useful. Yeah, I don't think it's this. Nope. Yeah, we're gonna have to go all the way back. So, we're just gonna cut the clip and go to the boss instead. Alright, so right now, we're at the boss. And we're just gonna go over here. And the reason we kept the COC and blink to the top is because right away when we put this on, we're gonna see these two, okay? So make sure that you kind of like have these 2 gems up and the page scroll to the top before you close. Because otherwise, it's not gonna show, okay? And it only happens when you kind of like have to do something with your skills. But if you don't do that, just keep it up here and you're gonna see it displayed right away. So get that out, get that in. You don't need blink for this one though, it's just like a map boss. So right away, sigil, I curse, and keep moving. Boom. Keep moving. Some mana flask. Boom. There we go. Number 79 map. Anyway, that's the map run. So I hope you find this entertaining and informative. As always, please like and subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!